First, we need guaranteed jobs at fair wages so that everyone who wants a good job can get one. Next, we need super Medicare for all so that everyone can have access to quality care without co-pays or deductibles.
A five-part plan from a Senate candidate, Richard Winfield, a professor at the University of Georgia and a Democrat running for U.S. Senate. The special election going to be in November. Continuing a conversation as we hit 9:18 on Classics today with Professor Winfield. All right, get to as many of these planks, platform planks, as we can in the time we have left here, another 10 minutes or so. Medicare for all. Somebody noting in the conversations in Iowa, the caucuses there on Monday, 4 years ago, it was kind of a fringe idea. Now it's embraced by everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's becoming evident to many Americans that we're facing a crisis in terms of the explosion of healthcare costs and the inability of many Americans to be able to pay for the healthcare they need. And as I think we all know, the biggest source of personal bankruptcies is healthcare costs. Now, I speak of super Medicare for all because Medicare is not adequate in terms of the services it provides. First of all, it has co-pays and deductibles, which many people cannot afford, so you can't even use it. It doesn't cover everything. And of course, it only applies to a part of our population. You know, we need to have access to healthcare in order to exercise any of our freedoms. So it's a fundamental human right. And a single-payer healthcare system has 5 advantages. First of all, it's great for business because it means that business no longer has to pay for part of healthcare costs. And that was one of the major things that made American business uncompetitive, particularly the auto industry, where German, French, et cetera, car makers.
Well, let me just stop right there because you're going to demand taxes from businesses to pay for Medicare for all. I mean, you're going to have for the people who work for businesses, the people who own businesses, corporate taxes. You're going to tax businesses moving forward.
I don't think you even need corporate taxes. We can instead have a tax system that focuses on a highly graduated income and wealth tax. And we can lift the burden off corporations.
Okay, so a wealth tax, not just an income tax, but wealth tax.
Yeah. And one thing you have to, and one reason for that is that there's much more wealth than there is income. It's about 5 times as great, and it's much more unevenly distributed. The top 1%.
Well, it wasn't distributed. I mean, it was earned. Somebody compiled somebody amassed the wealth.
Yeah, but when you ask how it was earned, well, it was earned through the contribution of everyone who works and contributes to the prosperity of corporations and so forth. But in any event, it's there, and if you think about taxes in general, you want to have taxes structured in such a way that they promote our freedom, and that those who are going to be having the burden of taxation should be those who the tax payments will do the least to restrict their opportunities. And obviously, that depends upon how much wealth you have. Now, we're talking about a plan that would reduce health costs in half, because we Americans are paying twice as much as every other developed nation for healthcare. And it's partly because we have this proliferation of different private insurance policies, which add all sorts of administrative costs, advertising costs, and in a sense, they prevent us from being able to negotiate in strength with healthcare providers to keep costs in line with that of the rest of the world. So if we have a single-payer healthcare system, everyone gets the proper coverage. We are able to lower costs to a level than the rest of the world. We're able to have maximum freedom. We can go to any healthcare provider we want. I think we all know that if you have a private insurance plan, you're restricted in who you can see.
If I like my doctor, I can keep my doctor.
Exactly.
Right.
I mean,
I've heard that before.
And I think it's a completely phony issue about, well, that was not true about Obamacare. It did not put you in a position. You still had to use insurance plans that restricted you, but this is different. The other thing is it is a completely bogus issue about whether we're going to prevent people from keeping their plans. There's no need to tell people you can't keep your plans, but no one in their right mind is going to keep a plan where they have to pay for it, where they're restricted in who they can see, where they have co-pays and deductibles, whereas here you will be getting your healthcare needs provided for, and it will not be paid by payroll taxes, which are levied on employees, not on everyone. It will instead be paid by highly graduated income and wealth taxes.
Right.
And I think we could have tax relief for 90% of the population.
Richard Winfield, Senate candidate. I want to move along here and get to some of the other planks on the platform. What else are you, the big 5, what are you focused on?
Well, another thing is leveling the playing field between employee and employer, which I think is crucial because, markets are such that, as Cox Enterprises shows, in order for a business to be viable, it has to grow and increase. in order to be able to be competitive and have the resources it needs. And that means we end up having far fewer enterprises than there are employees. And that sets in place an imbalance in what opportunities individuals have. And to balance that, we need to enable employees to join together in unions and collectively bargain with their employers, I should say. And we also have to establish a fair representation of employees on corporate boards. The dominating form of corporate organization is share issuing public corporations, because that allows corporations to acquire the greatest amount of capital without having to pay interest on debt and so forth. And we live in a society where corporate boards have no representation by employees, and they make all the fateful decisions on shipping jobs overseas, introducing automation that robs us of jobs, of producing things that are not up to adequate standards, of polluting our environment and so forth. So I think we can transform things from within by having these elements of fairness. We need to allow at every enterprise with multiple employees, all employees, whether they're gig economy, part-timers, contract employees, to be able to elect representatives with whom management will have to engage in good faith bargaining, and at the same time have a say on corporate boards.
Would there be, any room for right-to-work states? Georgia is one, a right-to-work state. Any room for a right-to-work state in that model?
Not if by right to work you mean what we have here in Georgia. I'm a state employee, and the right to work law deprives me of the right to engage in collective bargaining and the right to strike. Now, these are fundamental human rights that are
Well, you understand the difference between the private and the public sector, though. The private sector unions are arguing with management, labor and management are arguing over the division of profits. You work for the state. There aren't supposed to be any profits to divide.
But there still are revenues. There still is a question of how the revenues that are
people like FDR and George Meany were against government unions.
Well, I think that if they were, I think they were mistaken. I'm not sure FDR was against government unions, but I think it's a mistake. I think no matter who you work for, you have a right as an employee to be able to bargain with them and to have a seat on the table. And I think this is good for our whole economy and prosperity, because obviously we know what is going on. We have important things to contribute. And when everyone has a reasonable income, we have maximum consumer demand, which is good for business.
Let me go ahead, about a minute left here. Let me go ahead and put you on the Senate. You're in Washington right now, and you're there with the Democrats, and the trial is winding down today, 10th day of the impeachment trial. We've been talking 30 minutes. We haven't brought up President Trump yet, but let's do here at the end. Where are you on the whole impeachment issue? Where would you be by way of calling for witnesses or voting to remove? Where would you be on all of this?
Well, look, I think if we're going to have a trial of a president who's been charged with impeachable offenses, well, a trial requires looking at the evidence. And the Senate is conducting the actual trial. After all, bringing impeachment is a matter of what you could say like a grand jury, bringing an accused.
So the 17 witnesses that we heard in the House were, in fact, grand jury witnesses.
You could
in
think
that
of it in that
analogy.
way. And I think now you have another legal process going on. And there's a responsibility to have a real investigation.
He's been charged with neither a high crime nor a misdemeanor. Do you think he has committed an impeachable offense?
Well, I think there are other things he's done that are impeachable, which are not part of the charges, such as he has, I think, violated the emoluments clause, because he
profiting off his hotels and properties.
All of that, and in a sense having Marines stay at his places, et cetera, et cetera. And I think he obstructed justice with regard to the Mueller investigation by, in a sense, threatening witnesses and refusing to cooperate. So I think now we have an abuse of power in a similar way with regard to what happened here. He violated the law by not allowing resources that have been allocated to Congress, to the Ukraine, and so forth. So I think that there are real issues, but they deserve to be investigated.
Folks find you online, your campaign website?
Yeah, the campaign website is winfieldforsenate.com.
Winfield. And spell that, by the way, like the baseball player.
WINFIELD
There is a professor of philosophy at the University of Georgia, and as of a few days ago, a Democrat running for Senate. Thanks for riding out here this morning. Best of luck on the campaign trail. I'm sure we'll talk again between now and November. Thanks for your time this morning.
Okay, thanks for having me.
Richard Winfield, candidate for Senate, 927. Classics of the day, the very briefest breaks. Bottom of the hour news. When we come back, the really important stuff. Never mind who's running for Senate. We have football and basketball to discuss. Super Bowl to be played on Sunday. Get to that when we come back. Classics of the day, WGAU.